Tacoma?
I'm in Tacoma. Yeah, I'm in Tacoma this weekend.
How's that going?
It's really well. I did Spokane Thursday, Friday, and those went good. And then we sold out both shows last night. We got one more tonight, so I'm not mad about it.
Oh yeah, and I almost love that you don't have to do the Thursday, Friday, Saturday. If you can just do Thursday, Friday, drive like 5 hours and do Saturday, Sunday, it's like
Yeah,
so
it's
much better.
great. Yeah, and my fiance, her best friend lives up in Seattle, so she came up too. So she's been hanging out there. So it's just been a good, easy weekend for all that,
We don't
which
get
is
enough of
nice. There
those.
hasn't been a lot of good, easy weekends the last year or so. So I'm happy to see it for once.
Yeah, that's why I'm excited. I think you've been to all the Heliums during the pandemic.
Yeah, yeah. Me and Yates were talking yesterday about how like basically all the heliums we went through like the freaking murderers row during like the worst possible times you could do any club, like during that. I think when I was in Portland, it was when the damn riots were happening, or like they weren't as big a deal I think as they were made out to be, but that was the
But
narrative. It was the city's on fire. Like, but if you want to hear Ryan tell penis jokes, go ahead and come down here. Like, man.
well, yeah, I felt bad because it was like your first joint here. It would have been way bigger with. I mean, we still did okay, but it would have been so much bigger without all the distractions, I guess. So I'm curious, like, how's things going now? Are you still getting some of that? Because we've talked about that first AGT wave that kind of carries you through your clubs the first like 2 years. Are you still catching that, or is it
A
little more
little bit,
difficult?
but like it's gone down a bit, and part of it is it's been 2 years since my season of AGT, and part of it's just like it just depends where you go. Some people care about COVID more than others, and some of it's been bad luck. Like Portland was bad luck just because, if there's big protests and things happening, like we couldn't plan that ahead of time. That wasn't a well thought out plan. But right now it's weird. Like sometimes if I'm in more traditional red places, I'm doing okay just because, they don't care nearly the same way. COVID's fake for a lot of them, so they'll still come out and do whatever. And then if I'm in more, blue places, a good chunk of my fan base is people with disabilities who aren't gonna be risking going out in the middle of a pandemic. And you can't hard sell right now. If somebody's
Yeah.
nervous to go out, you can't be like, but you really should. It's just a little bit of possible death. No big deal.
Right. Yeah, it sounds crazy to be like, get your ass up, get in here, and you're like,
Yeah,
whoa.
yeah. You gotta do enough promotion so the clubs are happy, so it like shows that you're trying, but you can't like needle people the same way to like if they're on the fence, because I know it has to be a hard no right now because people's comfort level is what it is.
Well, for me, and let's see. So we reopened end of June. So I've seen like kind of a wave and then a slow and then a wave, and we're kind of back down to a slow where the delta is kind of keeping people from going out. And you've been out the whole time. Have you noticed anything different, or has it kind of been the same? I guess from start to now.
It's been pretty similar, but a lot of that is just I've been doing different markets. You're kind of looking at it from like one
One
place.
market, one place.
Like
Yeah.
this is what part of Portland's doing. Like if I go to Florida right now, it's probably going to be fine. But like if I'm doing, maybe Boston or like I'm doing something more traditional liberal, they're going to be a little bit more tentative about it. And the only thing that we've kind of noticed is different is that like we're masking up all the time. I'm vaccinated, like I'm not super worried about getting like really really sick,
Right.
but we see hundreds of people. Like if I'm working every weekend, I'm in front of a lot of people, so I'm just wearing the mask. Here nobody cares. Like Tacoma right now, everybody's pretty on board. They're like, okay, yeah, we get it, we're gonna wear masks.
Right.
And it sucks, but it is what it is. You're in Alabama, like somebody threw Yates's merch back at him because he refused to take his mask off for a picture.
He threw the hot sauce back at him.
Yeah, they threw the hot sauce right back, and she was like, "Oh, you're gonna take your mask down for the picture?" He's like, "No, I'm sorry, I can't. Like, we just see too many people." And she like whipped it back at him, and it's just like, so it's just a different mentality. Like that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. It's just people having different levels, and for me, I'm kind of to the point now that like I'm not smart enough to convince people to do something they're not going to do,
Right.
like I'm very pro vax, I'm very pro mask. I think that's what's healthiest for me right now. If you're not though, there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to make you go, okay. Yeah, at this point.
Speaking of what you could say, have you changed your material? And I say this with like no disrespect. Most of your stuff is very like, you're not over here like, hey, Jimmy Carter was a dyke or whatever. Like you're not
Right.
going nuts, right?
Yeah.
But have you changed your material based on where you're at? Because I mean, again, in Alabama, you kind of don't want to be like, I've seen it here where people are like, hey, who's vaccinated? You know, most people clap, be like, all right, cool. But are you able to do that in those markets, or has your
Um,
stuff kind of like changed, or how are you treating you and your material?
yeah. In general, I've always tried to cater what I do to where it can work anywhere. Um, because I don't want to work hard on jokes that I can only do at 50% of the rooms I play. You know, and I'm like, on a personal level, I have very strong opinions, as most people do. Like I have my political stances and all that. From a marketing and business and branding standpoint, it doesn't really work for me. Like right now, I'm a handicapped comic. Like that's not all I do, but that's sort of my branding is. Like I'm kind of speaking to a lot of those people. So I don't need to come in with my, Trump sucks or Biden's old or, whatever. It doesn't benefit the rest of what I do.
Right.
It's just going to make people mad. And if that's your brand, awesome. There's a lot of political comedians who are doing incredibly well right now. It's not what I do. Um, and I've kind of done that, intentionally. I when I started comedy, I never wanted to not be able to play a room because I didn't have the material that would work. So, I'm pretty confident that my stuff, maybe with small tweaks here and there, I could do, I can do Alabama with a lot of like, traditional Southern rednecks, which are kind of my people. And I could also do like urban rooms and make that work too. I never wanted to like be like, well, I can't do that because black people don't like me. I never wanted to have that be, what I had to make a decision on. So
Right.
I'm pretty much doing the same hour wherever I go, maybe with small tweaks if it's a little more, if they're a little more aggressive or, passive on certain things right now.
And so you started comedy like way before you got America's Got Talent. Was the AGT, I guess, push kind of scary, or were you like, thank God I don't have to keep fucking middling? But I mean, to me, it seems like so like, I don't want to say overwhelming, but like, whoa, I'm starting to blow, and it goes quick. It's not a slow creep. How was that kind of for you going into clubs and you know what I mean, just like the adoration that you get at that point?
Yeah, I will say it was the scariest part of it. It was something that I was ready for, because I had been, not to sound like, a cocky bastard or anything, but I was ready material wise to be a headliner for a long time. But you know how it works, until people want to see you. Some of the funniest people on the planet nobody knows about yet, and they're just not going to sell tickets. Like that's there's a business side to this as well. It's not just being the funniest person in the room. That's not how it works. But like you said, like AGT is fast. For a lot of people as on the come up, maybe you catch a late night set and you get a Comedy Central thing, and then you get on a podcast that's really big. It's kind of like there's little steps that you take so that you get to experience what that brings now.
Right.
AGT, I mean, I went from nobody knowing who I was to immediately 15 million people see you, and AGT positioned me so well. Like they, it's not rigged. I don't want them to give that thing, but clearly, like there's certain stories they get behind more than others, and I was one they got behind. They were super behind me, and it's great because obviously I'm making better money now. It's nice to be the headliner. It's nice to be that guy, but I mean, I will argue to the day I die, featuring, money aside, is the sweetest spot in comedy.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
You get 20 to 30 minutes. No one's there to see you. And you don't even have to do all the MC. You don't have those extra work and the extra jobs to do. So like and if you do poorly, no one remembers you. And if you do well, you're going to get this little bump because like, oh, that was a pleasant surprise. Good for him.
Right.
So switching from that to like headlining, like I love the pressure. I like it. But now it's like, okay, the show is my show now. So I hope people show up. I hope people like this. And then especially right off of AGT2, I didn't have too much of a problem with this, but my live show isn't exactly what you saw on AGT, and AGT can be a little weird sometimes because you'll get a lot of people to come out that aren't comedy fans.
It's their
They're
first
AGT
time at a
fans,
club, yeah,
you know.
all that stuff.
They want to see the guy they saw on television. So if they think, oh, this is going to be squeaky clean, I'm going to bring my 10-year-old. And I'm not vulgar, but I'm also an adult who's done comedy for 15 years. So like I talk about other stuff too. And like, oh, he's talking about masturbating a lot. That's not what I got to explain that to my child that I shouldn't have brought, but didn't ask ahead of time.
Well, and there's just like different ways. Like, so at a comedy club, the goal for me to have the customer, I guess, act is you come in, you're polite, hello. You sit down, you order drinks and food. Oh, thank you. You ha 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 ha, and you leave. So there's no yelling out to the stage. There's no waving your hands. Like all that extra stuff to me is taking away from the comedy. So a lot of people, and no shade on them because they've never been to a club. Like this is stuff you learn. But I'm watching America's Got Talent. I'm yelling at my TV, and then I'm in a venue, and I'm like, whoa, because you can do that at Transformers or something.
Right.
But it's a weird, and most people come in and they learn quickly, like, oh, okay, this is how I'm supposed to act. But there are some people who see that thing, and then they come in and they become a problem. So it's lovely that people become fans of yours, and like, I want to come see you. But as a venue, you're almost like, let's get y'all under control and corralled so that Ryan can do what he's supposed to do, as opposed to you like, hey, thanks for coming out. Please stop yelling.
Yeah. You get AGT fans, like it's not widespread. I don't want to make it sound like, every person comes in and they're an animal who doesn't know how
No, it's like
work.
1 out of 300, but that still is enough.
Right. But you get so many polite hecklers is what I call them. So, and those are some of the hardest ones to handle. Like that's, comedians think like, oh, like, or when someone asks me like, or like, are hecklers bad? Like if the guy's just an asshole, that's a pretty easy heckler to handle most of the time because you can just tear into them. You can go nuts. You can, if they're being a jerk, they're not going to buy merch anyway. They're probably not going to be your fan. So who cares? You can just unleash on them. If someone like keeps yelling in the middle of your setups, I love you, Ryan. It's like, clearly they support you. So you don't want to be like, shut the fuck up, you moron. Because
Right.
like, they're not going to come back again. They're not going to buy a shirt. They're not going to buy. So those are the hardest ones because you got to tiptoe. You want them to shut up because you have things you got to do. But at the same time, you're like, okay, they clearly like you. They're not
Right.
upset. They just don't know how this works yet. So that I've had to deal with a lot more of that, I would say, after AGT than anything.
How do you go about dealing with that? Because with positive hecklers, what I try to do is I try to throw them like, hey, I know you're having fun, but if you yell out, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. So they're almost like, oh, okay, let me like, I don't want to miss the show. But from stage, how are you dealing with that when people are like, you should have won? And you're just like, yeah.
The way I usually try to do, if it just happens once, I kind of do a thank you, or I'll make some kind of little quick joke, like depending on if it's a man or a woman, I'll be like, oh, my mom came, everybody, some kind of
Right.
I try to do it light at first, and then if it keeps happening, I'll say something like, hey, okay, I'm going to need you to shut up right now, but I promise you, if you shut up now, we can talk as long as you want after the show. We can have a nice look. I do a meet and greet, and I try to give people some individual attention and, talk to them. So I was like, if you promise me you'll shut up for the rest of the show, we can have a nice little chat after. I'll give you some one-on-one time. It'll be a good experience. But right now, and then at that point, if they keep doing it, I'm like, I don't care if I get your t-shirt money at that point. Like you're just disruptive. You're ruining it. You want to cater to that person a little bit because they're a fan and they just might not know what's going on. But if there's 250 other people there, you can't ruin their night trying to help one person. It's just not fair to everybody else.
How has the meet and greets been going for you?
During COVID, it's weird.
Yeah.
It's not terrible. I feel safe, like it's as safe as you can be. But it's weird. It's been tough because like by nature, I'm a hugger, and for a lot of AGT fans, they're very passionate about the people they like on that show. And I want to be able to give them, because I'm appreciative. Like they didn't have to vote for me. They don't have to come to a show. They don't have to like me, they don't have to be there and support. So I want to give them something. So by like, usually I'm a hugger. I'm a good guy. I want to give you that moment. But right now it's just not safe. It just doesn't, I don't feel comfortable doing that. So it's hard sometimes when people are like, I want to take a picture with you. And I'm like, cool, stay the hell over there though.
Right.
We can do it like over the shoulder style, So it's a little weird. Usually, with this, what I do is if the club has someone available, I kind of just have someone standing nearby because people will just come behind the table. They don't. I don't think they're trying to be disrespectful intentionally. I don't think it's anything like that. But like, oh, I loved him on the show. I want to give him a hug. It's like, and if they don't take COVID as seriously as I take COVID, then they don't think it's a big deal. So I usually just have someone post it up there and then try to be like, hey, I'm sorry. I can't hug anybody until I can hug my mom. I can't hug anybody else, kind of thing. And usually most people are cool about it, even if they're a little disappointed, but it sucks. I mean, I don't think it's not what anybody wants, even people who are taking it seriously. It's not like I want this. I don't want restrictions. I don't want
Right.
people getting sick or possibly me getting sick. It's not fun. It just is what it is.
And so I just thought of this. After AGT, people kind of know your disability and stuff like that, so it's fine. But before, I'm sure you had people like, "What the fuck is going on?" Has that happened post AGT, where people are like, "What is going on with your hand?" Or has it been smooth sailing now that people kind of know your story?
It depends on the night. But I mean, you know how comedy clubs work. Some people just show up because like, oh, we have a night out. Let's go to the comedy club. Who's playing? Oh, I don't know who Ryan Niemiller is, but he was on TV, so he might be good.
Right.
So not everybody knows your full backstory, and I'm not arrogant enough to assume that every single person there is well versed in my career and my life. It's not how it works. So sometimes you can tell the energy. I have a couple of jokes early that I sort of use as like tests to see how familiar people are, for the most part. And if I get a couple, if I get some, not necessarily blowback, but you'll kind of get that like, oh, all right, this is what's going to be happening. Then I know to play with it that way. And if everybody's just on board right away, then I go, okay, for the most part, this is an AGT crowd or whatever. So they're familiar. So we're cool. We'll just kind of do what we do.
How far? So I know all comics almost like a boxing match. You kind of feel the opponent out, right? You're like, where can I go? How long will you do that before you're like, fuck it, this is gonna be a rough night? Like, what point are you just like, all right, I'm just gonna burn through my stuff because this is gonna be rough?
Luckily, that doesn't happen super often to where it's just going to be a nightmare. At least because of like disability stuff. If you're talking in general,
Yeah,
usually
just
I
in
know
general.
within the first 5 minutes. Like you if you do this long enough and you do enough sets, you just have this like the sixth sense that you're like, okay, man, like it might not be me, but this crowd just isn't. It's not hot, like you'll get it a lot. Like there's the old like Steve Martin joke, like the Friday Late Show is what made him quit doing stand up. There's just certain situational things that don't have nothing to do with you, but like, sometimes a Friday Late Show can be terrible just because people bought the tickets weeks ago without realizing like, oh, I'm gonna have to work 8 hours that day. I've been up since 5 a.m. and the show doesn't start till 9:30 or 10. So it's like not even that they hate you, they're just tired.
Right.
And a Saturday Late Show can be rough because the comedy club's probably not the first place they've been drinking. Like they pre-gamed on the way up there, and sometimes it's just like within usually about 5 to 10 minutes, I can be like, all right, this is either going to be a battle. Sometimes you're like, I can win them over. Like last night's Late Show was probably the best Saturday Late Show I've ever had in my career. Like it was still just a perfect story. Like they were just still great. I don't know why. I don't know the reasoning behind it, but they were just still fire. So I was like, cool, I can do my stuff. Last week when I was in Alabama, still had a good time, but it was a different energy. They came in like you can tell they've been rowdy for 4 or 5 hours already, and so the show wasn't about me, it was about them at that point. And you just power through. There's certain tactics like sometimes you're like, okay, this is going to be more of a crowd work show because they want to be abused a little bit. That's what they want. Like you're not going to do your bits about growing up in Indiana or whatever. They don't care about bits at that point. So I mean, like you said, it's a boxing match. You just got to be able to feel them out, and that's one of the hardest skills I think to learn in comedy, because early on you don't have that in your repertoire. You have your jokes, and you hope the crowd is going to be receptive of them, and that's not always the case.
And there's so many little things that go into a night of like sometimes the weather's hot, so people are a little more agitated. Sometimes parking was bad, and now people are more upset. Sometimes Something crazy happened where someone passes out when they're waiting to get in the show. Like there's so many little things that could happen, and I don't want to say derail, but definitely change the trajectory of how a show is going to go that you have no control over whatsoever.
Yeah,
And that is
100% not your fault. Like even
e-
something little, like last night I had to. It took me about 2 minutes to small. Somebody just loudly dropped a glass, and like that's not malicious. Like there's nothing there, but I was in the middle of a setup, and like it was so loud you couldn't not acknowledge it, and okay, now that's happening because the audience cares about that. It's the same way like if you watch like a sporting event on television and like a fight breaks out in the audience for that like 2 minutes, you just see people going like, oh shit. And it's like it's no one's fault. That's just what.
Oh yeah, we've had a couple of those too, and then I feel bad because you're like, good luck. I mean, you have a fight in the crowd, and you're like, there's nothing we can do, but you got to keep talking about, how women shop or whatever. Good luck.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing you can do, and I learned this from theater, so I have a theater background, is if it happened, it happened. Like I think the worst thing you can do is pretend everything's fine.
That's my favorite shit to see.
Just when people are just like, oh, okay, here we go. What about the weather? You're just like, no, that dude just got knocked the fuck out. Well, are we going to talk about that at least a little bit? Like, we all saw it. Like, what do you mean? Like,
oh, that's my favorite shit when something happens and someone just, and you're like, because then the crowd stops believing in you almost to a sense where they're like, all right, you're not with us. This has
you're
to be
not
a
engaged.
thing.
This isn't a moment that you're talking at us. You're not talking with us.
And so I've seen like some people from America's Got Talent, like Drew Lynch or somebody, they after a while they start to, I don't want to say change, but they start trying to speak on other things and like, I have opinions, I want to tell these opinions, and it almost becomes a tectonic plate situation. Do you think you're going to get to that point where you're like, I've been doing this for so long and now I kind of want to talk about euthanasia or whatever, but do you think that after a while you have to almost separate from the America's Got Talent thing, or can you kind of just it's growing, you know what I mean?
Sure, yeah, it depends on what you're looking for. I mean, it's nice to have a little bit of a safety net, for lack of a better phrase. Like AGT is a big enough deal that I can probably headline clubs for a long ass time just
Forever,
off
almost.
of that. Just like whatever it is. And obviously it's going to be diminishing returns as time goes on, but like people remember that. And then, I get in the clubs and I always try to, I'm a big proponent of like just building good relationships anyway. I try to be easy to work with. I try to be a good guy that like the clubs are excited to see back and, kind of foster that. But over time, like you have to change. And like, it's I'm not 100% there yet, but it's already a part of what I do. It's not like I'm not doing the same bits I did on AGT, and I'm not like trying to not curse or anything like that. I've never been vulgar. I'm not like a guy who's gonna talk about eating your ass or whatever. That's just not who I am on stage. Unless you want, Nick. Unless you want.
Yeah. Next time. Yeah. We need to hear about it.
But like, so it's like early on, especially when you're getting those people coming to clubs for the first time ever who maybe don't know what live shows are. For me personally, I didn't want to like, it's not that I was tiptoeing, but you don't go full bore like, I lied to you for the last year.
You rip off the mask.
Exactly. But at a certain point, it's like, I mean, I always try to do on stage what is important to me at the time and what I think is important. And they like it or they don't. And you have to be confident enough in what you do that people are going to like you. Some people are fleeting fans. Some people like you on the show and then you tell one joke they didn't like and then they block you on Twitter or whatever. You just go, okay, well, they weren't supposed to be. And that opinion's valid. I think I'm in a minority for a lot of comics on that, where like, if you don't like what I do or you get offended, like it's not my place to tell you were wrong. Because everyone has their own life experiences. I don't know what's going to trigger you. Like, that's fine. But, like, that's not how the job, like, you don't get to tell me what to do. So, like basically how this relationship works is I tell a joke, you laugh or you don't. Like, that's kind of what it is. It's like, you don't get to tell me why I did it wrong. You don't get to tell me what I should do instead. Like, you either laugh or you don't. And both are valid responses. You know, you don't have to like me, but I'm not going to cater to you, because like I've been told almost every joke I've ever told, at least one person's been like, "Hey, I didn't like that joke. You shouldn't tell that." I wouldn't have an act if I got rid of every joke that pissed somebody off. So you just eventually have to, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and as an artist too, like you don't want to be stagnant either. You know, like you always want to, you know, like my act, like obviously I'm always going to talk about my disability in some form because it's my life. It's not a gimmick. It's, I see the world through this perspective, you know, like I wouldn't tell you not to talk about being black because like, you know, that's your experience. That's your,
exactly,
you know, your viewpoint. So I don't want to only talk about that, but there's going to be a little bit of that. And there's other things I'm passionate about too, you know, maybe not euthanasia, like you said, but
I just do something, you know, yeah. Well, you said something that's actually interesting to me because I think a lot of people don't see it as we see it. Again, I'm not like a comic, but I know enough about it where it is a job, right? Where people are like, wow, look how much fun, but it's still like a job. In what way for you do you treat it as such, right? Because I think the people who are successful in comedy do treat it like not a 9 to 5, but I'm working, as opposed to I'm just fucking going nuts. So how are you maintaining that direction and that that seriousness about the craft of comedy?
I mean, it's one of those things that, especially now, like this pays my bills. This is what's going to help me and my fiance buy a house. This is how we're going to be able to start, you know. So I can't just go out and say and do and act however I want all the time, because you know it is a business. When you're first starting in comedy, no one cares if you're there or not. You know, like not to be, you know, put too fine a point on it. It's not quite that sinister.
Pretty close,
like,
though.
Yeah, but if you're an open micer and you decide to quit, no one gives a shit. You know, it's not that you were a bad person or whatever, but like it doesn't matter. Like there does become more pressure on you because like now that I had all the AGT stuff and I'm headlining clubs, it's not just me doing my thing now. You know, I have an agent, I have a manager, I have, you know, there's people that rely on me. Now it's supporting my family. I can't, you know, if I can't feel off and like, I don't think I'm gonna work this weekend. You know, like I'm a little tired. You know, I don't think I'm gonna. I don't want to do this podcast with Nick. You know.
Yeah, nobody want to hear that. Yeah.
Exactly. So you got to start doing it. And for me, the way that I've always been able to still treat this as a business that I'm passionate about is I'm very aware of not working as well. So when it's time to work, I work hard. I'm always going to give 100% on stage. You know, I don't phone it in up there. I'm always going to try to make my dates unless, you know, my plane explodes or whatever things happen. You know, I've had such bad plane luck the last month or so. Like
you had one explode?
Not explode, but like, you know, I think that's the next step. That's probably, you know, I've had so many things where I've just barely been able to get to gigs and, you know, so there's always that, and I'm always going to work hard on stage. But for me, the reason I love this so much is that when I'm not doing this, I also love video games. You know, I love my fiance and my dog, and I like hanging out with them. You know, I like watching sports. Not everything has to be work all the time. And I know it's like, that's a little counterintuitive because like you're supposed to like, oh, that's like an American thing. Like you work hard, you're supposed to work 24/7. That's how you're going to succeed. It's like, no, the reason I love this is because when I'm not doing this, I'm not thinking about this shit all the time, you know, like, and that helps me, like, when it is time to work, I have that energy. I'm, like, revitalized. Like, okay, this show's going to be fun. Like, these bits, like, what I'm working on here, this is going to be great. Oh, we're auditioning for this. It's going to be good. Okay, audition's done. Sweet, I have this video game waiting for me. I've been trying to play for a month. Let's go play that.
All right, and then for you, even if you're like, all right, let's say it's Thursday, your plane was crazy, you're rushing into a club. What are things in that club that stand out to you as like, okay, this is going to be a good experience? I mean, to boil down that question, what are things in a club for you show you that this is a good club and you're going to have a good weekend?
Well, one of the biggest things, and it's such a small thing that requires no real extra effort, is just people saying hi to me. and check it in, like the staff, I don't need everyone to be my best friend. Like I know you guys are busy. You're getting drinks and food out to a lot of impatient human beings, So like I always do my part on my end. Like I try to be extra nice to the staff because like the wait staff and the bartenders have a far harder job than I do that night, for sure. People are there to see me. If they have a bad time, they're not going to yell at me. I'm going to be the hero for their night. If something happens, though, they're going to be yelling at the waitress. They're going to be yelling at the bar. They're going to be yelling at you. Like, I can't believe this was 2 minutes late. How dare you do that?
Right.
They're not going to yell at me for that shit. So I always try to do a nice thing. So like that's the thing, because sometimes a club, you can tell. I don't need my ass kissed. I think hopefully you remember. Like I'm pretty low maintenance.
Yeah, you're great. You're fantastic.
I'm not asking for a lot of stuff. I don't need you to go shopping for all these like deli meats and all this stuff, like my manager yells at me because I never asked for anything. Like Ned will be like, you got to ask for something. And I'm like, I'm happy to be there.
I mean, yeah, because you could get, I don't want to get nuts, but there, you can almost get anything you want.
Right.
At the end of the day.
Me,
yeah.
Like I know there's like a certain point where you have to kind of like, you have to act the part, of being like, oh, I'm a headliner, so I got to do this. But like, man, I'll tell you, I did this basically for free for 13 years before AGT. I used to have to sleep in my car because I couldn't afford hotels to be able to get to gigs and stuff like that. So the fact that like, oh, you're going to let me perform, you're paying me so I can pay my bills and I don't have to sleep in my car. Like, that's awesome, like.
Well, and there's different people. Like Dave Attell doesn't need anything in his green room, and he's, people have different needs and things like that. But there's some comics who like, I just want to come in and knock it out and leave. Like Bert Kreischer, who is probably one of the top 5 traveling.
Yeah.
He has nothing. He's just like, I'll go to the bar. So it's, some people are like, I need green M&Ms. Some people are like, fuck it, let's just run. And
yeah. I mean, the only things that like I really need, just be polite if we're talking, just and be a human, just like that. That's all I want. Like we just want it easy, like that. Like I just don't want to have to think too hard about anything because it's stressful enough for everybody, doing this. So I try to make it easy for you guys. Like I'm not going to be requesting those green M&Ms or like all this stuff, and I'm not bringing my posse of 30 people who you're supposed to feed and all this other stuff too. I'm like, man, just make sure the mic works, and like that's really all I need. And just be a good dude. Like I know not everyone's going to be your best friend. There's too many different personalities in this business, both on the performance and the club side. But like, man, just be an easy hang. I try to do that. Just like, let's just. I know I'm not in this business to make friends per se, but I want to be friends with as many people as possible. Like, I'm almost 40. I'm too old to be like backstabbing and like worrying about like being a dick. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, and it just, I don't think people understand how quick that turnover is. So like, you're coming in on Thursday. Hi, Ryan, how are you doing? Saturday, hey, it's so great to meet you. Bye. And then next week it's, hi, Beth, nice to meet you. You know what I mean? The turnover is so quick. So if those 3 days are pleasant, it makes it so much better, I think, on our side and your side too, because then you're like, well, this is fun. Like in Portland, we're lucky with good crowds and a good room, but if you had to come in and be like, fuck, man, I'm dealing with this guy Nick, he's gonna fucking be an ass, that translates to the audience, I believe, right? And that translates to the staff, and then it just brings everything down, no matter what we have to offer outside of management.
Yeah, it's happened very rarely, which I'm happy about. But there are a couple clubs, like I won't name names because it's not important enough to do that. But there's a couple clubs that I've basically had to be like, okay, so the general manager was such a dick, I won't work there until they're gone. And like, and I also understand my position too. It's like clubs don't need me per se, and I don't need those clubs per se. That's why I feel this has to be more of a like. Nobody needs anybody, like, because if I won't work a weekend at your club, there are 1,000 comics who are just dying for that opportunity, So, and for me, like, this is just even dealing with staff, dealing with club owners, dealing with bookers, dealing with other comics. It's never made sense to me to be a dick. Because the way I've always looked at it is, even selfishly, even if I don't care about you as a person at all, it doesn't make sense for me to be an asshole, because I don't know what you're going to be later. There's
Yeah.
and I don't want to make that sound malicious, because I try to be a good dude, because it's just easier to live life that way than be a dick. But there's been plenty of people who were, okay, maybe this person was a bad open mic comic. They weren't funny at all. And I could have been like, I'm so much better than you. Get away from me. But now they book like 6 clubs, because maybe that was what their position in comedy was. Maybe they weren't going to be a good comic, but they're a great booker.
Yeah,
And if I had been an asshole, they're going to be like, well, Ryan was a prick. We're never bringing him in. And I just lost potentially 6 weeks of work.
And like, I'm an idiot, so I don't know too many industries, but I think if you're a dick, it like connects auto parts, right?
Right.
You're not necessarily going to become the president of Connects, and then now I can also buy your products at like all these other auto body shops. In comedy, it is very much like door people. I believe Dave Becky was a doorman in like Boston. Now he's one of the biggest managers of comedy. Like there's, you could talk shit to a bartender who ends up going to ABC and being someone. This is like a very weird industry where at any moment, anyone you're interacting with can become someone. And again, it's a selfish way to think about it. But
Sure.
if you have no heart, at least think about it in a selfish way.
Exactly. I mean, that for me, I didn't want to give you the impression that I'm pretending.
No,
No,
I
like
but
you,
it's
Nick. We're cool, Nick.
we're cool.
But like, it just never made sense for me from that standpoint. And again, you don't have to kiss ass. You don't have to like pretend to be everyone's best friend. But it takes no effort just to be like, hey, Nick, how are you, bud? Good to see you again. And that's it. Like, that's really all that's expected, And then if we become buddies, great. That's even better. But just being like, hey, instead of being like, hey, where the fuck's my Coke Zero, asshole? And because like, I was fortunate enough when I started kind of get to feature a little bit. I was working, when I was doing like moose lodges and like stuff like that. I was featuring for dudes who were like huge in the 80s, like big stars. We're on Carson like 15 times, and I realized that like for a lot of us, obviously I want my star to keep shining brighter and keep going up, but there's no guarantee that like I'm still gonna be a big star 20 years from now. Like I might need to be working those Elks lodges and stuff like that later. And people have long memories, like none of this is guaranteed to me whatsoever. So like, if nothing ever happens again after AGT, and I hope that's not the case, if I was a dick to you, there's no chance I'm going to keep getting to work the club, even when maybe my star is not quite as bright as it is today. So it's like, I still want to be able to work. And even if it's not going to be, banging like it was, I might still be able to work, because when I come to clubs, I get along with people. People seem to enjoy me being there. The staff likes me. They know I'm going to tip. They know I'm not going to be rude. I'm not going to yell at them. You're not always going to be on top. For the most part, most people don't always stay there,
Well, and the sad part is if you are always on top, that means you died. You know what I mean? Like early,
yeah.
Right? Like it means you're there, and then like, so it's better.
Yeah.
Everyone's gonna have some dip.
Yeah, there's very few Betty Whites who can keep like being badass at like 97 or whatever. That's usually not the case for most people. So, but I'll need to work at some point, and like, I'm going to be really mad if like, 30 years from now, like I still need work and people are like, no, you were such an asshole. Nobody like, like, why would I have you here?
So Ryan, we're going to do this thing called Notes from a Producer. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. We'll answer them and we'll get you out of here so you can get like rest before your show. But thank you so very much for coming on and talking to me. It's been a while, and I'm glad to see you doing good and see you again.
Thank you. You too, Nick. Yeah, hopefully we can. I want to get back to Portland when the city's not on fire. See what we can do.
It's wild now because our COVID numbers are worse than when you were here. With the Delta, so we have like mask mandates, but we still have 250 people in the room. It's been interesting.
Yeah. I'm gonna say, man. Like I don't want to say like I'm living in fear per se, but it's jarring, man. Like I'm finally getting to the point now. I don't know if you had this, but like when everything was kind of shut down and like no one was working, or like everything was maybe like 25% capacity, I would watch like, I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. I'll use that as an example. I would be watching like old wrestling events from like 10 years ago where there'd be 80,000 people in there. And like I was like hyperventilating. I'm like, where's their masks? Why is everyone so close to each other? Like it screwed with your head for a while. I'm finally getting to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm vaccinated, I'm careful, I still keep my distance, I wear my mask, but like it fucks with you, man. It
Yeah,
does.
I'll watch an old movie and I was like, why is nobody wearing a mask? And this is like Home Alone when they're running through the airport and I'm like, oh my God, COVID.
Yeah,
It's
they
really
just
cliche
kissed a
too.
stranger that they don't live with. I can't believe they would do such a thing.
Right?
Irresponsible.
This movie needs to be X-rated. Can't nobody see this. This is out of control. So first one, can you tell us a fond experience you remember from when you were still featuring? Again, it's like the best gig, but are there times when you're like, wow, this is just like a really cool comic, or this crowd was electric, or anything as far as when you were featuring?
So I have a couple that come to mind. I was lucky to get to have some like really cool people like vouch for me to get me into certain clubs. Guys, not to get too sad about it, because like this business is hard. It's hard to break through as a comic. There's more talent trying to get into spots than there are spots. It's just the nature of how it is. So I don't want to make it sound like this is the only reason, but like, man, having a disability, it's hard for like a lot of bookers won't take the time to like legitimately look at you because they just assume you're going to be like a gimmick or like a novelty act or like what it is, and funny's funny. I don't care what gimmick is. Like if someone's funny, I don't have to love it, but I need to be able to look objectively at like, okay, maybe Larry the Cable Guy's not for me, but clearly a ton of people like him, so
Yeah.
I'm not wrong. Like I'm the one wrong here, So I was lucky enough to have like some headliners pretty early, kind of feature me. So these aren't specific instances that happen, but like early on, Brad Williams took me to a few places like that, and Brad and I are still really good friends to this day, and it meant a lot to me that like I was 2-3 years in and probably didn't deserve it, but he saw something in me and gave me those opportunities, and getting to work with people I probably shouldn't have been working with yet, but again, being a good dude, they liked me, so they bring me in. Getting to work with Miss Pat a few times, like she would bring me to certain clubs before she really, she's crushing it now.
Huge now. Yeah.
She's big time. And just like some of the times, like it was nice. As a feature, what I would always do, and I didn't do it to try to ruin the show. I don't want you to get that mentality. But I always wanted to, because a lot of times the only reason I got into the club is because someone vouched for me and brought me in. And I always wanted to be like, okay, well, I'm going to have the best set of the night. I'm not going to try to bury anybody. That's not what my intention was. But like, I'm going to make it so they have to bring me back on my own accord now. And I remember working once, and he's a good friend of mine. I love him to death, Greg Warren. Greg Warren is a super funny guy. He's someone that I don't understand why he was never bigger than he was. He's still a killer now, but like he's fantastic. And I remember I was featuring for him, I think in Oklahoma City. It was kind of one of the first times, again, wasn't trying to bury him or anything, but like I outsold him in merch because I did so well, kind of thing. And it was one of the first times, like, again, I wasn't trying to rub it in anyone's face or anything, but it was the first time for me personally. I was like, oh shit, this might actually, like, I got something here, like people like my act and want to see this and want to support after the fact, so it was that was kind of like a turning point where I was like, okay, this could be a full-time thing now, because I was still working day jobs at the time, but I was doing that too.
Well, those are always my favorite relationships that I have with comics too, like Caleb Sinan or Jessica Michelle Singleton, like people I met featuring, someone brought them, and then I'm like, yo, can I get you back to feature, headlining like an off night? Those are my favorite relationships that I've been able to cultivate, because you are almost, I guess it's a weird way to put it, but I'm forced to be like, well, you're funny. Like if I saw you featuring, I couldn't be like, oh, well, yeah. I'm like, no, fuck, you're funny. And then can you please come back and bring that funny back? And then as you can kind of see people grow, that is, to me, is the best relationships I've been able to grow with people, because it's like from the jump to where we are now.
Yeah, and Jessica and Caleb are both fantastic. Like I've known them both for a long time, and I'm very happy. I know Caleb's recording a Comedy Central thing here soon, and Jessica, we text all the time. She's a fantastic human being and funny, but like it can be tough sometimes too. Like it's a weird position to be. I had this problem for a little while where I was too good of a feature. Like
Yeah,
so, like a
yeah.
lot of like it was hard. Like not to toot my own horn too much, but I'm hard to follow because I have a very unique gimmick. Like like my perspective is very different. You don't see comics who have this
Well,
out
also
there.
it's funny. If it wasn't funny, I could follow it. It still has to be
Sure, yeah,
funny.
100%. But like, so I'd be really hard to follow. But like up until AGT, I also couldn't headline because you also have to be able to sell tickets. You have to have a name. So like I was in this weird position where I was like, if people happen to show up, they're gonna have a great fucking time. They're gonna love the show. But my name alone on a marquee, people are gonna be like, I don't know who the hell that is, so I'm not going. I was in that weird limbo for a while, so it's nice to finally push through that a little bit, and now I can be like, this is what I can do as a headliner.
Right. And then you get to bring people along too, because I think the headliners who were helped out also help out. Like,
Yep.
and I love it when I get to see people who are on that cusp of being a headliner, like funny enough to be a headliner, but again, they just don't have the name. And then you get to see those people because comics like yourself are bringing them along, which is
Yeah,
so beautiful.
yeah, and you always want to pay it forward because like I got a lot of this from Brad. Like Brad was very good at instilling this like in my head. But like I'm a firm believer that there's no like spots per se. I think that's like this kind of false dichotomy that people think like, well, I can't headline because Ryan's headlining, so I need to fuck him over so I can headline. And it doesn't work that way because like if you're good enough to headline, they'll find a spot for you too. Like when I did AGT, I didn't take a comic spot. If they wanted you on the show, they would have also put you on the show. Like they'll make a room for it. They'll make a pilot for you. They'll make I'm making that sound like it's very easy. It's not, but because Miss Pat has the show on BET doesn't mean that I don't get a show on a streaming.
On
They don't go,
BET?
sorry. No, I think I could do. I do well. I do good in urban rooms, my friend. I do
I
well.
agree. I agree.
Because I'm not scared of them. That's the thing. I'm gonna go ahead and say this now. If you're a white comic, don't be a scared white comic in an urban room. They just want to laugh. That's all it is. And if you treat them like they're big scary monsters, they're gonna destroy you, and rightfully so, because you're a piece of shit. Funny's funny. Just go be funny.
So on that note of scary monsters, what was it like starting in LA's comedy scene? And did you do any comedy in Indiana before you left?
I did not. So I started in LA.
Jesus fucking Christ, man.
Well, in hindsight, that was a really dumb fucking move. I know that now, Nick. Where were you in 2006?
I wasn't knowing it either, yeah.
So I was under, and it sounds really stupid now, but this was legitimately the mindset that I had. In my head, like I knew comedy existed everywhere. I knew there was comedy clubs, like Crackers was the big one in Indianapolis at the time. I knew that stuff existed, but like in my head, I was like, oh, but if you want to work there, you have to start in LA or you have to start in New York. Almost like there was like a factory that puts, like that pumps up a comic. That's how you earn your stripes, and then you get to travel. Because in my head, I thought like being a road comic was like the ultimate. That's what I wanted to do. I was like, oh, you get, and I still love it. Don't get me wrong. I love doing it. But that was like the sign of success. Like, oh, I get to I'm in Seattle. And then next week I go to Las Vegas. And then I'm in Miami. I guess it's so cool that I get to go everywhere. And it is cool.
It's very cool.
Maybe it's not the pinnacle of all things comedy, but it's still a pretty dope life. I'm not upset about it. So I didn't know any better. I was at Indiana State University. I was just graduating with my theater degree. So I'd done some stage stuff there and I did improv in college. That was kind of the performance. I never did stand up. So as soon as I graduated, I did like a summer play. I did like a 3-week play gig in Indiana. And then I just packed my car and I moved to LA. I had a buddy from college who he was an engineer. So we were roommates when we were in college, and he just had a free room basically. And he was like, hey, I know you wanted to start this. you can't sit around and do nothing. You got to work, stuff. But like, as long as you're working and trying to make stuff happen, I won't charge you rent. So I basically had a sugar daddy for 2 years, which was dope. So, and then my girlfriend at the time, she also lived in Southern California. We had been long distance, so I kind of was like excited to get near her. So I was like, oh yeah, LA makes sense. We broke up like 6 months later, as you do. But the kind of happy ending of that story, we're now engaged. So that is my fiance. We made it work out. We were just too young and dumb at the time to make it work, but we circled back. But so I started in LA. Again, in hindsight, wouldn't have done it that way. It's I would always recommend to anybody that wants to start, find your local scene. And then you move as soon as you're a killer in that scene. You kind of you big fish, small pond for a little bit. Like Indianapolis, I think, has a fantastic scene, and I think it's a great scene to like grow. It's very centralized. Helium there is a great club. I consider that my home club still to this day. I love Avery. I love everybody that works there. I've known them since the old Morty's days, before it kind of came into there. But Indianapolis is a great scene. You're very centralized, so you're like within a very short drive of a lot of other really good scenes. Become a killer there. Like really start to destroy there, because LA and New York, I don't think they're the big scary ooh that a lot of people do, but they also don't like. You're not going to get fostered there the same way. There are thousands of comics in LA. They don't give a shit that you're there. So. And
I think in these littler scenes, once you get a decent like 3-4 minutes, people start being like, "Hey, come on my show." Like it's in LA, they're not going to ask you because you're funny. They need you because you have credits. So in these smaller towns, which I guess are any town, not LA or New York, you could kind of get famous in a way where people just want you on their shows, and the more shows you do, the better you get. It's all stage time, and you can get way more stage time in Portland or Indianapolis than you can in Los Angeles or New York.
Exactly, and it depends on your goals too. But like it also depends. Like for me, I wanted to try to become a road guy, and that's hard to do in LA because it's hard to get more than 5 to 7 minutes. Like you get a 7-minute set in LA, like you're getting a pretty good night of work there, but you can't feature with 7 minutes. That's why there's a lot of great comics. And again, a lot of people are in LA and they do comedy because they want to get a sitcom or they want to do, and that's totally valid too. It doesn't, you don't have to be wanting to be Chappelle to do comedy. You don't got to have to be that guy. But for me, I wanted to be able to travel. And in LA, sure, those 5 to 7 minute spots are great, and you do a lot of great networking, and it's hard not to get good, because I was doing 3 mics a night sometimes just because there's so many to do. You don't get as many of that in Indiana, so you might be a little slower with the build, but I think you get more quality stage time early, because you do some of these small ass towns like in Indiana. If I'm working, or even like Owensboro, Kentucky, which isn't exactly the mecca of entertainment. But if you go to do a show there, they're so excited that someone came there. So you're getting a good, real audience. LA, I like performing in LA, I do. But people are a little more jaded because they can see me and they might have a good time, but they can also see the most famous comedians in the world pretty much any night they want. So there's not quite the same novelty to seeing a live show. So you definitely, I in hindsight, I would not have started in LA for sure.
Yeah, that's always, but it worked. So who cares at this point?
Yes.
All right. So last question. Then again, thank you. I'll get you out of here so you can get ready for your show.
No worries. I just got some pizza to eat. That's what my day is looking like.
Oh, I don't want to mess that up. One bit.
I know. So yeah, that's more important than the show. The show will be fine. I'm getting hungry though, Nick. Come on now.
So tell us a reason you love stand-up that might not seem obvious.
Now, a reason that I love stand-up might not seem obvious. That's a tough one. I will say it's the only world where I've really felt like accepted, I guess, like fully. Having a disability is weird, man. It really is. I know a lot of what I put forth, especially in my act when I did an AGT, and this is also true because I think you can be conflicting things at the same time.
Yeah.
But a lot of what I always put out, I'm very positive. I've made the best of this for sure. I think I put a good spin on it. I've turned it into a career. I've turned it in a way to show other people that it's not a death sentence. You can still get stuff done, but then the way I describe it to a lot of people is if this was like a video game creative character, this is not the template I would have chosen. There's a lot of shit that comes along with having a disability. It just is what it is. And comedy is I say this lovingly, it's filled with so many freaks and misfits and just people from all walks of life that I mean, this will sound probably a little corny and cheesy, but I grew up in a hometown. My hometown was 3,000 people, and it was exclusively white. Comedy has let me learn about Black people and Indian people and Mexican, the diversity in this business, because you can be anything and still be successful in this business, and I don't take that for granted. I think just in general, it's human nature. People want to be around people who are like them, no matter what that is. That's what you tend to gravitate towards that. And this business is so fantastic for just getting to see people from all walks of life. And then I think it's one of the reasons I've been able to be just a better, well-rounded person in general, is because you start having those first experiences and you're like, oh, okay, so he grew up in a different country than me, but he's dope as hell. So who gives a shit?
Right.
We're both chasing the same dumb dream that no one should do, because comedy's insane to begin with. And you all just have the same thought process. So that's something I love about this business, and not even just from the who you work with, but just the audiences too. When I first started, I would have never thought that a cholo crowd would have liked me. I would have thought oh, they're gonna eat me alive. Why would they like some poor white trash trailer park crippled kid from Indiana? And then when you see them start laughing, you're like, oh shit, this is a pretty universal thing. Funny's funny. People, if you're funny, you can bridge a lot of gaps that way. And again, that sounds a little after school specialist, and
no, it sounds fantastic because it's true.
But it's true. It's true, man. It's so cool getting to. And I noticed that a lot with AGT too, man. There's some people that that show has such reach. So I think a lot of people, when you think AGT, your first thought's probably okay, that's middle America, Bible Belt, white Christian families, probably what like that. The amount of times I've been stopped or someone's come to a show and it's a dude that you would think oh, this guy's he's a thug. He's a scary looking dude. He's got tattoos on his neck. And he's like, man, me and my family loved you on AGT. We voted for you the whole time. And you're like, comedy's pretty fucking cool, man. It brings all kinds in, man. It's very cool.
Oh, man. Well, Ryan Niemiller, he didn't want to do this podcast, but he did it. Thank you so very much. Where should people go and check you out?
Sure. So at Cripple Threat 8 on all the stuff. I'm pretty active on social media, so if you chat with me, I'll probably chat back at you. Cripplethreat.com for the tour schedule. I also do a fun little podcast with my buddies Johnny LaQuasto and Brent Terhune called The Cafeteria. It's one of my favorite things I do every week. It's a great time. We're just three idiots. It's kind of reminiscent. We try to base it off of if you remember in high school where you might not see your friends all day except at lunch, and then you come into the cafeteria and you're like, here's the dumb shit I thought of this morning, and you have the talks about it. That's kind of where we go with that. So you can find us anywhere on there, Spotify, iTunes, all the good stuff. It's called The Cafeteria. And like I said, just come to a show. It's a good time. I'll be happy to see you. I have a really cool life, and I don't want it to stop anytime soon. So help me pay my bills. Come to a show and let's have a good time.
You're the coolest, man. Well, enjoy your show tonight. Hopefully I get to run into you soon. But again, man, it's been so good to talk to you in person and then here. Thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely, Nick. Anytime. See you soon, bye-bye.
All right, peace.